Well, I've just met with some of the top business leaders here in our city. I want to thank them for joining us here today at City Hall. And there is unanimity, there is absolute consensus among us on the need to renew mayoral control and ensure that we can keep making progress with our city schools, keep making reforms, keep ensuring that we serve our 1.2 million school children and, of course, their families as well. I want to thank the business leaders who have gathered here. I'll acknowledge them in just one second, but I want to say that there was a real commonality amongst us on the centrality of education to the future of this city. I've talked a lot about the need to tackle inequality. You can't do that without improving education. We won't have the workforce we need in the future without a stronger education system. The business community that these leaders represent won't be able to find the talent they need if we don't constantly improve our schools. We won't be able to attract businesses to this city. And we can't do all of that without mayoral control of education. It's as simple as that. It's the only thing we've ever seen in the way of education governance that works. We remember clearly what things used to be like in this city. When it came to education, there was dysfunction, there was chaos, there was corruption. Things didn't move. Everything was about politics and horse trading. We won't go back to those days. So I want to thank these great leaders of the business community, some of the most respected voices in the business community of this city, for standing up and saying it's time to renew mayoral control, and for recognizing this is an issue that has historically not been a partisan issue. It has transcended partisanship. There's one issue where there's been real consensus in this city. It's been mayoral control of education. Business, labor, faith community, Democrats, Republicans alike have come to the conclusion over these last years that this is the only way to move our schools forward. And by the way, that is true regardless of who's mayor. As you know, I supported the change to the mayoral control system when Michael Bloomberg was mayor. I didn't always agree with Michael Bloomberg. I thought he was right, that the mayor needed to be accountable. And I supported the renewal of mayoral control the two times it happened in Albany. So the fact is, this is one of the issues that has united people across the spectrum, because we've seen it work. We've seen how much more quickly we can improve our schools and take action under mayoral control than anything we ever saw under the school board system. And we've ended the pattern of corruption and favoritism, nepotism, all the things we knew, sadly, were too frequently a part of the community school board system. We ended that. So it's time to clearly crystallize this debate. The hour of decision is drawing near. Mayoral control will, if not acted upon in Albany, mayoral control will lapse at the end of this month, and we'll go back to a system that doesn't work. So important that these voices have come forward, as have so many other key leaders of business, as have editorial boards, and of course our senior Senator Chuck Schumer, so many voices calling for Albany to address this issue. I also want to say, obviously a powerful voice is that of Governor Cuomo, and I want to thank him for this morning reaffirming his support for a 3-year extension of mayoral control. So let's look at the scorecard in Albany. The Assembly has already voted formally for a 3-year extension of mayoral control. The governor affirmed again today that he believes in a 3-year extension of mayoral control. He said it, by the way, originally in his State of the State address earlier in the year, and he said rightfully that this system should be extended to other cities around the state, a position I hold as well. Well, for now, over 1.1, almost 1.2 million school children's futures hang in the balance. And we've got to cut through any semblance of partisanship and realize this is an issue that rises above that. I want to thank, as I said, I want to thank the leaders here with us. I'm going to acknowledge some who are not speaking, and then you'll hear in just a moment from Dick Parsons and Kathy Weil. But I want to thank Rob Spire, the chairman of REBNY, Bill Rudin, the chairman of ABNY, Nancy Ploger, the president of the Manhattan Chamber of Commerce, and Andrew Steininger, the senior VP and chief of staff for the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce. I want to thank all of them for their passionate support for a renewal of mayoral control. Look, we've said to show that this system works, it is about reform, it is about investment, it's about constant action. That's why last year I affirmed that I would invest $150 million in the 94 most troubled schools, our Renewal Schools program, and as you saw in the recent budget proposal, we're adding $34 million to that program this coming year, $60 million every year thereafter. We will turn these schools around with new leadership, with master teachers, with longer school days, with after-school programs, with teacher training. We'll turn them around, or if we find in short order it's not working in any particular school, we will close that school. I've made that very, very clear. We keep investing. We've invested in after-school across our school system. Every middle school child this coming school year will have after-school if they choose to. 3 more hours in a safe, secure setting where they can keep learning and parents will know they're safe. Pre-K, something that never could have happened without mayoral control. 53,000 kids in full-day pre-K right now. That number will go up to upwards of 70,000 starting this September. This was done on a very tight time frame. It was done very successfully. Could never have been done in the bad old days. Only possible under a mayoral control system. Ask the 53,000 families benefiting from full-day pre-K right now how they feel about the current system. They will tell you. This is the kind of thing they've been waiting to see, action on our schools that benefits them. The PROS schools we talked about last week, 64 new ones we announced by next year, 200 schools that will suspend their union work rules and their DOE work rules to innovate. Teachers will take responsibility for what will work best for their kids, longer school days, more teacher training, weekend sessions if necessary. These are profound reforms and they're happening because under a mayoral control system, it was possible to make such extraordinary changes. Let me just remind you very quickly of what the alternative would look like. And I want people to understand there is a countdown clock here. We're on a 30-day countdown clock. And even though the Senate did offer a 1-year extension, they offered it with a provision that we find unacceptable, which is a budgetary sign-off for the Department of Education, unlike anything we've ever seen the state propose towards any of our agencies before. Obviously, a measure that would end the concept of mayoral control of education in a different way. It would put the legislature in Albany in charge of New York City public schools, which would not be in anyone's interest. So, if by the 30th mayoral control is not renewed, we would literally return to the old Board of Education system. We would have a Board of Education named by a variety of different office holders. There would not be a mayoral majority. We would have to have school board elections the following year. Those school board elections would reconstitute 32 local school boards. They would then choose their local superintendents, and those school boards would decide which principals were fired and which were hired. And sadly, we would see a return to the nepotism and corruption that loomed for too long in this city. That is what is hanging in the balance. There was a lot of money involved in the bad old days in how our schools were run that fell into the wrong hands. That kind of corruption would reemerge if we went back to the old system of governance. We're going to fight with everything we know how to fight with in Albany to not let the one thing that is working be taken away from our school children and their families. There's still time, obviously, to fix the situation in Albany, to get to a 3-year renewal, and make sure we can keep making progress in our schools. A few words in Spanish before I bring forward Mr. Parsons and Ms. Weil. Gracias al control que la alcaldía tiene sobre el sistema escolar, hemos podido empezar programas innovadores que están mejorando nuestras escuelas. Sin embargo, la ley estatal que permite a la ciudad controlar las escuelas está a punto de caducar. Hoy me acompañan grandes líderes de negocios para pedirle a Albany que extienda el permiso y nos permita seguir progresando. Estamos trabajando duro para mejorar las vidas de nuestros niños. Y con esta extensión podremos asegurar un mejor futuro para todos. With that, it is a tremendous honor to call upon Dick Parsons. He is one of the business leaders in this city, and he has been for years, who is most respected, former CEO of Time Warner, former chair of Citigroup, one of the foremost experts on how we need to change our education system for the better, because he's looked at it from the perspective of private sector, and he also has looked at it from the perspective of a very prestigious career in public service before he went into the private sector. Respected by members of both parties, respected by people in government and business alike, and it is a particular honor to have you here with us at City Hall. Dick Parsons.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to be very brief. I certainly was not the most distinguished member of the business community, even here before you today. You got Rob, you got Bill, but I was the tallest, and they thought the handoff with the mayor would go best. Listen, I'm not going to repeat everything the mayor said, because he's quite articulate, and I think everybody who's sitting here gets the joke. I will tell you this. The last time I was in this spot, behind this podium, in this room, it was a different mayor. It was the same issue. It was the same issue. This is an issue that's been on the highest place in the business community agenda for the last 20 years. 20 years ago, I was chairman of the partnership, and this was our highest agenda item. We thought we had fought it through. We thought we got where we needed to go as a city. We thought things were going well, but here it is again. And my only point to you today is to say this is not a partisan issue. This is not a Republican versus Democrat issue. This is not a referendum on do we like what this current mayor is doing, and if we don't, do we pull the plug? This has to do with the most profound, the most fundamental, the most effective way of organizing the delivery of educational services to the children of the city, 1.2 million, as you've just heard. And, you know, as the mayor indicated, in my past, I spent some time in politics. I enjoyed it. It can be a lot of fun, the horse trading, and there are a lot of issues that aren't clear and that do need to be sort of sorted out in this give and take kind of way. This isn't one of them. This isn't one of them. This is not an issue that the children of New York should pay the price for the wrangling that goes on, sometimes legitimately, up in Albany. This is an issue where the evidence is clear. As I said, I doubt there's a single person in this room who has a serious intellectual query as to whether the current method of accountability and management for education in New York is superior to what we had before. It's just a question of, do we hang it in with a bunch of other things that need to be sorted out? And on behalf of the business community, and on behalf of, you know, lifelong New Yorkers, of which I'm one, on behalf of those who got their education here, I mean, I know the system can work. Last time I was here, I introduced myself as Dick Parsons, PS 45, Junior High School 142, and John Adams High School, all New York City public schools. It can work if it's properly managed. We're on that path. It ain't perfect, but now is not the time to start messing with it and threatening to go back to something that we know didn't work. So on behalf of all New Yorkers, I guess I'm here just to urge the legislature and the Senate in particular in this case to sort of come to their senses, decouple this from the rest of the stuff that has to be sorted out, and do the right thing, which is extend mayoral control as it was in the past. Thanks. Now, my boss, Kathy Weil.
Thank you, Dick.
Let's give you more height. And let me just thank Kathy. We're going to suddenly make you taller. And let me thank Kathy for her extraordinary support on this issue and all the work she's done gathering other business community, leaders who feel so deeply on this. Thank you to her as CEO and President of New York City Partnership. Kathy Weil.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Parsons. Last week, in a matter of 24 hours, we got 75 of the city's top CEOs to sign on to a letter urging the leaders of the state legislature not to change our governance system when it comes to education. For those of us that have been in New York City for many years, we recognize that the loss of employer confidence in our public education system that was a main contributor to our urban crisis. And it took years, decades, to begin to bring the community together to figure out a better system and to get that implemented. The partnership led a task force with the leaders of the Senate and the Assembly in 2001 that designed the mayoral governance system that we have today, and that is something that we cannot allow to be at risk. I think that in New York City, we were all surprised that there would be any question that somehow we would want to revert from a system that is taking us in the right direction to a system that tore us apart and contributed to the destruction of our education system. We didn't expect this to happen, so at the last minute, we sort of said, let's come together to make sure that there's no question. It is irrelevant who is mayor. We have to have the mayor of the city accountable for what happens in our public schools. That's what mayoral control is about, and particularly it is about real control. It's not diluting it. It's not changing it. It should be permanent, but the efforts of the governor and the Assembly so far to come on board with at least a 3-year extension is the bare minimum that we can put up with in the city. This is very important, and so we really are calling on New Yorkers all over the city and state to recognize what is at stake here. It is the future of our kids and the future of our economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well said. Well said. So we're going to do first questions on this topic, and we'll have our colleagues stay here for that. And then when we go to off topic, you can stay or leave depending on your liking. But since everyone is here in support, I want to make sure they're here if you have any questions for them as well on this topic. On the topic of mayoral control education. Yes.
Can you just talk a little bit about what kind of, obviously the only obstacle you're describing is the Senate and that proposal, if I'm correct. What leverage do you have with state senators? Are there particular state senators you have communicated with or talked to who you think might be in support? I know only Marty Gold has really come out in support of removing mayoral control from it.
Well, we certainly appreciate Senator Golden's support. I won't go into private conversations. I'll say I think there's a lot of understanding amongst the Senate majority about why this is good policy. And that's why I believe fundamentally there is an intellectual framework to get to the 3-year extension and to do it without any poison pills. When it comes to other questions that have been raised regarding transparency, I've made clear to Leader Flanagan that we absolutely embrace any consistent requests, legitimate requests for more sharing of information, and that I'm happy to meet with him and the Senate at any time to discuss the direction of our schools and what we're trying to do and take their questions and hear their concerns. But I would think, again, on the question of philosophy, on the question of the analysis as a matter of policy, I don't hear the kind of disagreement maybe I would hear on many other issues. Now, you ask leverage. I'm not going to be a pundit here, but I'll say simply, I think the presence of these extraordinary business leaders and the letter that Kathy put together, how many CEOs? 75 CEOs in this city. I like to put things in context. I don't think there's many places in this country that have 75 CEOs joined together in common cause with the mayor of the city and so many other key elements of our community all calling for the same thing. I don't think it would be ignored in the state capitol. So I'm very hopeful that all of these voices, the editorial boards that have spoken, Senator Schumer, all of these voices will add up and convince Albany to do the 3-year extension.
Mr. Mayor, do you take the state Senate stance on this somewhat personally? Because one would imagine that perhaps they're acting, just saying 1 year because of your brand of politics. And then do you also interpret the governor's comments this morning on the radio saying that he supports a 3-year extension as somewhat of an olive branch in what is being perceived as a feud between you and the governor.
I appreciated the governor's comments this morning. I think they were very helpful. As to the Senate, in the end, there are some issues that are just not your garden variety issues. And I think you heard from Dick and from Kathy, who have tremendous history on this issue, both of them. This is an issue that's always been treated as above the fray. It won the original approval in Albany. It's been renewed in Albany. Obviously, the state Senate Republicans were amongst the strongest backers of this idea. So I would ask us all to think about this on a higher level. It's not in the original legislation, there was not a provision that said mayoral control is a good idea depending on who's mayor. It was mayoral control is a good idea, period, because the other system did not work. And there needs to be accountability, and we have elections for a reason. And the buck stops here when it comes to our public schools. So I believe the same Republican senators who voted for mayoral control in the past could vote for it again. Dave.
Mayor, you just touched on this, and Dick Parsons says this should not be a referendum on how you've been running the city. But and I'm not trying to be snarky here, but your predecessor, Senate Republicans, they liked him. They don't like you.
I am sorry if I haven't won the popularity contest, but the point is that's not how we make decisions on something that affects almost 1.2 million children. It's not about personalities, it's not about egos, it's not about which party you're in, it's about our children, it's about the future of our city. And I think the fact is that history is very powerful here. Not everyone liked Mayor Bloomberg. A lot of people who even didn't like him still voted for mayoral control. They thought it was the right thing to do. People came together around the issue. A lot of Democrats didn't agree with him on politics, but they thought he was right on the issue. They supported him, and I supported him as well. He was right. I think it's one of Mayor Bloomberg's biggest accomplishments was achieving mayoral control. So I believe in the end, this transcends personalities, and I think a lot of very strong voices in this city and state are making that clear to everyone in Albany. I'm not going again to give you punditry. I think it's time to recognize that this is an issue that rises above the normal partisan fray.
Mr. Mayor, could you provide us with some context as to what's driving your assessment of...
Louder?
Could you provide us with some context as to what's driving your assessment of the structure of mayoral control academically? Are you looking at studies or test scores, graduation rates?
Well, I would say a couple different things. First of all, there's some evident improvement. The test scores have improved. The governance of the school system has improved in terms of efficiency. The amount of corruption was overwhelming in the past. We now see a system where things are managed properly. I think those are all factual examples, but I would add the experience we had establishing pre-K and after-school programs, pro schools, renewal schools. We did that all. I've only been here 17 months. We've been able to do a lot because we had the freedom to move and to get things done. So I think the jury came back, but if you want, I think it's very fair in public policy sometimes to say, you know when something is working because it's not the other thing. The other thing did not work. Our schools were paralyzed. We had revolving door chancellors. I mean, please, if for any of you did not live through that time, spend some time talking to these folks. We had great chancellors who couldn't stay in their job because the politics forced them out. We had corruption, we had nepotism, we had extraordinary inability to move reform. We're not going back. Let me come, I'll do this way and then come over. Yes?
Question for Mr. Parsons or for Kathy. Are you concerned that even though the mayor would like to separate out the mayoral control issue from the other issues happening and the disputes with Albany right now, have you picked up the phone and called the governor and said, cool it, we need your help, we need your leadership on this issue because this is bad for New Yorkers? I'm just wondering, as a business leader, have you had that conversation?
Well, I'll speak for myself, and then Kathy will talk about the broader effort. I haven't, to this point in time, although I am signatory to this letter that was put together, in part because, as Kathy said, none of us sort of anticipated this, but I will.
Just give you the height again.
Yes, we've talked with all the officials in Albany about the importance of this issue, that it should be treated separately. We put in our letter that this should not be coupled with charter schools or the tax credits or anything else. This should stand on its own. This is a governance of the system, and if we do not have this governance extended, we revert back to what we all know to be a totally dysfunctional system, and I think the credibility of our city and state would go down the drain.
Again, I'd like to note, this is bipartisan in every sense. I don't know the affiliation of each and every one of the 75 signatories, but I guarantee you there are Democrats, there are Republicans, there are independents amongst them. Dick Parsons is one of the most respected Republicans in this state and has been for decades. It means something when you hear this kind of consensus. It's a rarity, and it should be treated with reverence. Marcia?
Mayor, I'm wondering if you think that the Republican position on this issue is a philosophical one on their part, or if you think they're trying to, in a sense, get retribution for the campaign against them in the last election. Or the third option, which is probably more likely, is that they're trying to hold hostage some other issues, for example, getting you to agree on extending the cap on charters or tax credits. I mean, I wonder what you think is actually going on. There's so many possibilities given what goes on in Albany.
I do not believe it is essentially philosophical, because these same individuals voted for renewal of mayoral control in the exact same form, in many cases several times. So that doesn't stand to reason. It should be delinked. You're hearing it very clearly here. So might there be some who want to link it? That could be, but I think the argument here is quite clear. This one rises above the fray. Look, as I've talked about before, I don't think, elections and what happened in past elections should get in the way of the needs of 1.2 million kids. We're all going to do in an election what we think is right, and then the day after the election, we get back to work. I've worked with Republicans in the city council and in the legislature and in the Congress for years. We all know how to work together. It's not surprising that in election season we have different approaches. So in the end, I think the most important point is I do not sense it's philosophical. Therefore, it is resolvable. Sally, did you have?
In securing this kind of widespread support on this issue, did you ever hear from your predecessor, from former Mayor Bloomberg, since he was somebody who was able to get mayoral control?
Again, I give him tremendous credit for having achieved it. He's made very clear that he does not want to comment on local issues, and I respect that. Obviously, Mayor Giuliani has been supportive, which I appreciate.
You questioned that Governor Cuomo's leadership before. I know you complimented him today, but do you want to see him be more proactive, particularly on mayoral control with the state legislature?
I think he's made his point very clear today, and I think that's important leadership that we need.
Mr. Mayor, several years ago, the philosophy was that decentralization of the schools was the progressive way to go. And you, in fact, served on a school.
Yep.
And, I mean, just to take the philosophical argument and kind of project what would happen if mayoral control ended, it wouldn't really end because you would still be choosing a superintendent, et cetera.
Well, the community school boards would be choosing the superintendents. Remember, that's the pure reversion. I just want to stop you for 1 second and continue. But let me know. I want to make this point, then back to you. Because I served on one of these. I can tell you how it works. No, the chancellor doesn't choose the superintendents. The 32 separate community school boards would each choose their superintendent on whatever basis they want, and then literally have the right to hire and fire any principal in their schools. The chancellor's role would be profoundly reduced, and then you have a central board that would decide whether we even get to keep the chancellor. That's how dire it is, but continue.
The question I have is, after serving on a school,
Yep.
the schools that you supervised or oversaw, would you describe them as dysfunctional?
I've said this many times publicly, and I'm happy to say it again. I was proud of my service on Community School Board 15. It was pretty universally recognized to be one of the strongest school districts, one of the ones that had been free of corruption. I was part of a board that hired Carmen Farina as our local superintendent. She did an outstanding job. But I knew, as I talked to people from other districts and I was part of public life in the city, I knew we were the aberrant one, or one of the few aberrant ones. The tales of corruption would make your hair curl. It was unbelievable, the amount of overt nepotism that happened every day in our community school districts. The choices relating to principles that were based on politics, not education. It was a consistently ineffective system which was prone to corruption in many parts of this city, and it stifled any ability of the central leadership, the mayor or the chancellor, to actually make bigger changes. So I'm actually an interesting example. I experienced it. I was proud to be a part of that particular school board, and I don't want us to go back. And I didn't always agree with Michael Bloomberg, but I'm the first to say he was right to achieve mayoral control. I supported him at the time. I supported him at the time of renewal, and I think this is one of his greatest achievements. I think there's something about this issue that brings out a bipartisanship and a higher level of consensus that you see on very, very few issues nowadays. And I think, as Kathy and Dick said, the profound sense in the business community that this is about the survival and strength of our city, that we have to get this right. It's just not your garden variety issue, and I am convinced that if we went back, we would live to regret it deeply.
I think we can take one or two more on topic and then a few off.
Rich, that was Karen Hinton's lead off telling me to change the topic. Welcome, Karen. Well done.
Mr. Mayor, is there something you think that the senators want from you in exchange for this? Is there some sort of, is there any deal that they're trying to make? I mean, is there something they're trying to extract?
I think there's a lot of other issues on the table. Everyone knows what the big ticket items in Albany are. And I'm, as a friend of mine said, and it's true about me personally, I was born at night, but I wasn't born last night. It does not surprise me in Albany that different items are linked. Whether that's a good approach or not, there is a tradition. But this one has not been linked in the past. This one was above the fray, and it should be above the fray here. Yes. We'll do two more. So 1, 2. Okay, there.
I don't know if he has an on topic.
We're on this topic. Last call on this topic. On or not? No. Last call on this topic. Yes.
You started off this year by wanting permanent control of schools, mayoral control. Mm-hmm. Now you're having to fight for 3 years. I mean, is that just a testament of how uphill this year has been in Albany for you?
I think it is a reality that in each year, in each moment, there's different realities, different conditions. The governor put it on the table at the beginning of the year. The Assembly affirmed it through a formal vote. I said at the time, and I still feel it now, I can make a very strong argument why the jury has come back and this system is the only one that works and we should just keep it long haul and stop this renewal process. But you know what? When 2 of the 3 actors in Albany agree they're ready to do 3 years, I'm comfortable saying, great, let's do 3 years and let's move on and let's keep making our schools better.
Do you think that would be a win, having 3 years?
It's not about wins or losses. It's about it would allow us to keep doing work on behalf of the kids. Okay, we're going to move now. So if anyone has other important things to do, you may go about your... It's the height thing. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Take care. Thank you. Okay, you're first.
Yesterday you said, thank God there weren't too many people around the site of the crane collapse, but in the past few months there have been so many crane incidents, construction site incidents where people have died. Does New York City have a problem with the construction industry, and is there more that the city can do to make sure that it's safer?
We're continuing to work on it, but I want to dispute your characterization. Thank God there have only been a few incidents with cranes in recent years in the city. I'm actually think if you think about the reality of this city constantly under construction, cranes, some of the highest cranes anywhere in the hemisphere, and yet there's a very strong safety record by and large. So this was quite aberrant. The full investigation is being undertaken by Department of Buildings. We're obviously looking for anything that we need to know here that might change our policies. Look, sometimes it is a situation where something happened that was truly very narrow and specific to that one incident, but I'm not going to conjecture until we get the investigation back.
Sir, what's your reaction to reports that you're not getting along with the governor?
Again, as I said today, I am pleased to see the governor reaffirm his support for the 3-year extension of mayoral control education. I think that's very helpful, very constructive. And I think we can work together to get things done. Andrew.
Follow up on that, Mayor. What the governor said today is he respects the tenacity which you have delivered in fighting for what he said. In a sense, if you weren't fighting as hard as you were, he wouldn't respect you so much. Do you share that view in terms of the way he has approached your initiatives, whether it was UPK or 421A now? Do you say to yourself, boy, this guy's really digging in, I really respect that?
Well, clever question. I give you cleverness points. Look, I think he's right. I obviously have seen some of his comments from earlier. I think he's right that we both have different jobs to do. And we know each other a long time, and he's right that we both, do this work with a lot of intensity. I think there are some philosophical differences, clearly, and that came out, for example, on the approach to pre-K. But I also think there are a lot of areas of agreement. And as he said earlier, I think it was a good characterization. We both come out of work on affordable housing. We both have put a lot of our careers into the creation of affordable housing. And when it comes to, example, the issue around 421A, there's a very important common ground, which is we both need to figure out how to make this create more affordable housing. The one thing we can say for sure about 421A is status quo is unacceptable. We cannot let this current reality with 421A continue. So I thought his comments today were constructive, and it's not surprising that each of us has strong views, but also I think there's a lot we can get done. Back there first, Matt.
Have you spoken to him personally since your visit last week?
Yes.
In what capacity?
What capacity? I'm mayor of New York City. My name is Bill. What are you trying to say? In what capacity?
I'm sorry, can you just sort of characterize the conversations you've had since last week?
Well, I never go into the details of private conversations. I would say we've had, clarifying conversations. And I think, again, there's some real common ground, which is evident in his statement today on mayoral control. And I think it's evident on the point that he made about the common goal we share around 421A. I think he made clear today on rent that we need to see a strengthening, which I agree with and appreciate. So conversations happen all the time, either between the governor and I or between our staffs. It's pretty much an everyday thing that one or the other is happening. Yes.
Mr. Mayor, I wanted to ask you about the police foundation's contractual work with some business and personal acquaintances of Commissioner Bratton. Just wondering if any of that raises any concerns with you, particularly as far as conflict of interest might go.
No.
The governor still seems to have a disagreement with 421A. He questioned the need to extend the tax break for 35 years. He said that's billions and billions of dollars in tax breaks. And he's unclear whether you would get enough affordable units out of it. He also questions why you want to have affordable units as opposed to low-income units. He said affordable housing is people making $110,000 a year. He said, how about taking care of people who make $50,000?
Well, look, again, let's stipulate that the governor and I have both spent a lot of our lives working on affordable housing issues. In fact, we met working at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. And I spent 3 years there, and then throughout my time in the city council as public advocate, and here I've been working on affordable housing issues, so that adds up to a lot of years. We, in our proposal, require affordability in every building that receives a 421A subsidy. Remember, today, it is the overwhelming majority of buildings that get a subsidy have no affordable units in them whatsoever. So the subsidy goes for private housing with no impact on affordability. The current subsidy goes for luxury condos. We would end that. In terms of income levels, our proposal drives down the income level that would be reached so that some of the families at lowest income levels could be reached and have an opportunity for affordable housing. Again, I have put forward a plan for 200,000 units of affordable housing built or preserved, the largest in the history of this country, with a lot of that plan oriented at people who make $50,000 and less in this city. So I think it's quite clear I will always respect the governor's bona fides on affordable housing. I think mine are quite clear as well. We believe our plan is going to achieve a lot more affordability when combined with the mansion tax proposal, enough affordable housing for 160,000 New Yorkers, 160,000 people, including at some of the lowest income levels. The alternative is to continue a subsidy that's unfair to the taxpayers and overly generous to developers. So the status quo, the one thing we can say in this debate, I think I heard it from the governor today. We have to do something different. I agree with that. We have a proposal on the table. The one thing we cannot do is continue the status quo.
Do you think that extending the tax break by 10 years from 25 to 35 is the trade-off in order to get developers to go from 80-20 to 70-30 so that you would actually get more units of affordable housing?
Here's what I think.
For the extended tax break?
You're talking about a package that includes more affordable housing per building, affordable housing in every building, affordable housing at a lower income level for families that are struggling, and no more condos being subsidized at all. That is a tremendously strong package, and that should be a long-term package because it's good policy. Let's remember the history. This subsidy was created at a time, I think legitimately, when the city was struggling economically deeply. The 70s and 80s, it was very hard to get people to develop here. That was fair to say, what are we going to do to make sure the city doesn't fall behind economically? It became outmoded quite a while ago. I fought for reforms in the past. We achieved some, but not enough. In today's real estate market, it's inconceivable that we would continue the status quo with 421A. So if conversely, we came to a larger agreement applauded by the real estate community and housing advocates alike for a very strong affordable housing plan, why wouldn't we want to lock that in for the long haul? Because bluntly, I would fear the alternative otherwise, that it would get watered back down again. Jonathan.
Mr. Mayor, you've had kind words largely for the governor today. Over the weekend, though, you had some rather sharp remarks about his lack of being a partner. You even questioned your endorsement of him. This is far from the first time that the governor has proven an obstacle to your agenda.
Again, I think you just characterized that a little differently. I don't know what exact quote you're working from, but continue.
Okay. So my question is, your candor this weekend speaking about the governor seemed a little different than other times when he has proven to be an obstacle to some parts of your agenda. Mm-hmm. I guess, why is this time different for you? Why did you choose to speak out the way you did?
I think in the vein of I call them like I see them, I think we needed to make sure that the needs of the people of this city were being addressed. And I'm gratified today that there's been some progress. And I'm someone who's always looking for a constructive way forward. So I'll speak my mind on each occasion. Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, there are several folks from the city who are up in Albany today, including Cardinal Dolan, lobbying for the education tax credit. Can you talk some more about your position on that particular issue?
I've never been comfortable with that approach because I think our central mission is to reach the overwhelming majority of our children who are in traditional public schools. We have a long way to go to get them to where they need to be, and that's where the resources need to be. So my view, even though I have tremendous respect not only for the Cardinal but for our religious schools and have worked very closely with them through our pre-K effort, our after-school effort, and will continue to, I think the tax credit just takes us in the wrong direction as a matter of policy. Anna.
Last week, someone was busted for selling a ticket to the Staten Island Ferry for about $200, so $400 round trip. I was just wondering, what is the city doing about, cracking down on people's
Between NYPD and Consumer Affairs, an effort is being mounted now to stop that, and I am convinced we will stop that cold.
And then as a natural follow-up to that, when was
Please.
the last time you rode the Staten Island Ferry?
You all would know I didn't sneak out there, so you will find out. And I think I'll just sneak away and take a Staten Island Ferry ride. You certainly will have public record on when that was.
One final question.
Hi, Mayor. I want to try and ask the question a different way. Has there been a personal conversation or a change between yesterday and today? Between you and the governor, the rhetoric today is a lot more diplomatic than it was yesterday. I don't know if there's a compromise in the works on 421A between the two of you, or
You are a keen analyst of the human condition. Again, you guys, you're going to have to fill in your own blanks. I am making clear that I appreciate what I think is a very helpful message from the governor today on the 3-year extension of mayoral control. I think it's clear that we also share common ground on not just extending but strengthening rent laws. And it's clear that we share the starting sort of foundational view that something has to change on 421A and when the focus has to be affordable housing. That's good. Let's keep working on that. That's the way I look at it. Last call.
Separate subject. Last week, your administration decided to reinstate funding for summer school programs, summer camp programs. I'm wondering, what was the backstory there? Was there a mistake made, or was there like a philosophical decision after some protests?
The backstory is we screwed up.
Any
any?
I think that was quite a good explanation. We, we screwed up. We did not make clear enough that the intention last year had been to try it for a year, and then it would be one of the things we'd have to judge according, to all the other, or in comparison to all the other priorities we had. And I think we did not make that clear to the providers, and I think we did not plan appropriately to help people understand the adjustments they would make. We obviously took some substantial resources and put it into similar efforts focused on the 94 renewal schools. So we believe the model was good, but we wanted to apply it where we thought the need was greatest. But, I think we left a lot of folks with the wrong understanding of what was going to happen, and their concerns were real and valid. And I went back to our budget team and said, we're going to have to find some cost savings somewhere that we can use to apply to this, because it's late in the day, but they're right. The people who are raising the concern are right. And so we agreed for 1 year, and I emphasize, and please include this in your coverage, for 1 year and 1 year only. We will, from additional savings we found, apply the resources so we can continue that effort. So it was not our finest hour, but I'm glad we were able to resolve it. Thank you, everyone.